Hi everyone. I am Courtney Brown, Director of Farsight. This is an intelligence briefing that is specifically designed for use by the United States military. Now let me be clear that the United States military has not requested this intelligence briefing from us. We are doing this on our own, and there is no guarantee that the U.S. military will even watch this briefing. And if they do, they would probably not tell anyone that they did watch it. Although, as I will point out shortly, I think it is in the military's best interest to watch the entire briefing closely. For all those who are watching and listening, I want to thank you for being here. I hope that this briefing is heard by most or all of the highest-ranking officers in the U.S. military. If you are a lower-ranking officer and you have the ability to persuade any admirals or generals to watch this, it would be in both your and their best interest to do so, as I will explain as we continue. If you are a general or admiral in the U.S. military, I know your time is valuable, so I will speak directly. Your own survival is at stake, as is the survival of the entire U.S. military more generally, and a great deal more. This really is important, or I would not ask for your time. I am putting everything on the line by offering you this briefing. All I request is that you hear me out. I am assuming you have access to your own intelligence sources that can confirm most or all of the essential facts needed to address the conclusions of this intelligence briefing. Minimally, you can contact other senior military leaders who you know personally and who you trust, who can confirm these facts, even if off the record or only as a friend. Even an angry response like the one General Curtis LeMay gave to Senator Barry Goldwater when Goldwater asked about the extraterrestrials should be enough to confirm the essential elements that are needed to draw the necessary conclusions. Once you get the confirmation for the essential facts, which I will list shortly, support for everything else contained in this intelligence briefing can be found in the large collection of Farsight projects. Your future will depend on you taking these projects seriously. I ask that you be patient as I explain the conclusions contained in this intelligence briefing. If any of this information is completely new to you, I ask that you bear with me for a bit until I get to the end. Again, I am assuming admirals and generals can get confirmation of the basic facts that support these conclusions. We can call these facts assumptions for the time being to allow us to quickly move to the conclusions of this briefing. In your own words, you can change these assumptions to be facts once you get your own intelligence people to confirm the essential elements. The basic assumptions are these. The first assumption is that the extraterrestrials and their spaceships obviously exist, and they have long been operating here on Earth, going back a very, very long time. If you dig hard enough, you can certainly get confirmation of at least this as a real fact. Assuming you can get that fact confirmed, we will identify two general categories of extraterrestrials for our immediate purposes in this briefing. The first are those who have made agreements in the past with U.S. political leadership to allow them to work in underground facilities on U.S. soil and to conduct experiments on selected citizens. This indeed was a focus of one of our Farsight projects. In exchange, these extraterrestrials have promised help with understanding some ET technology. To do what they want to do, they require absolute secrecy among the larger public of their existence and their activities. We will call those extraterrestrials the controlling ETs, because they have a direct interest, as I will explain, in controlling the planet and its population as a valuable resource. The controlling ETs have a totalitarian political orientation. In terms of an example, one primary location where they can be located is underneath Area 51 at the lowest levels, although there are numerous other underground bases as well. And again, these are topics of various Farsight projects. At Farsight, we often refer to these controlling ETs as reptilians and Orions. The reptilians are labeled as such because of their genetic structure, whereas the Orions are typically more humanoid in appearance and are identified in terms of the star systems of their origin. Now, the second group of extraterrestrials we will call the free will extraterrestrials, because they have a near fanatical belief in not violating the free will of others. No major agreements have been signed between human political authorities and the free will ETs to our knowledge. The free will ETs also have no permanent bases underneath U.S. soil to our knowledge. However, both the controlling ETs and the free will ETs have a large presence in their ships located in the solar system. I am certain that nearly all admirals and generals can get confirmation of these things if you push hard enough. Now, the second assumption is that the primary interest of the controlling ETs is with the human population itself. They have their own reasons for this interest, and things that they have told to American political and military leadership may have no connection at all to the truth. The controlling ETs will say whatever will work in order to pursue their own interests. They are not interested in the minerals or the plant life on this planet. They seek to control the human population. That is the resource that they value here. Now, the third assumption is the idea of an ISBE. We are all ISBEs. An ISBE is a subject who is simply for the purpose of being. We are all ISBEs, and at Farsight we no longer use belief-laden words like spirit or soul. We are all just ISBEs. It is not possible to kill an ISBE. Our bodies are not us. They are shells that we animate and which eventually drop off. However, it is possible to confuse, capture, trick, and control an ISBE. This is true even with respect to ISBEs who are not in a physical body. The free will ETs are opposed to this, whereas the controlling ETs spend a great deal of resources in order to capture and control ISBEs. We are talking about slavery, and there is no one single purpose for the use of these slaves. They are used for everything that can be imagined, and lots of stuff that is hard to imagine. Let's be clear about this. We are talking about human trafficking on an extremely large scale. Now, the fourth assumption involves remote viewing. The data obtained by Farsight were collected using an advanced form of remote viewing, which is a highly structured mental process of remote perception. Remote viewing is not in dispute within the U.S. military in select realms. The military has used it in the past, and it can be safely assumed that it continues to be used by the military as a method of espionage. The original programs involved remote viewing are now public, but the current remote viewing programs within the military remain secret to the public. Extraterrestrials, both the controlling ETs and the free will ETs, utilize telepathy and remote viewing as normal processes of interpersonal communication, and of course, for espionage. Humans are the ones with the limitations in this regard, and there are historical and genetic reasons for this. Now, with those four basic assumptions established, we can move on. Again, I believe senior military leaders can get confirmation of these basic assumptions if they dig hard enough with the intelligence resources that are available to them. What I will summarize now are findings that have been established with the large collection of public projects done at Farsight. Then I will move on to the non-obvious conclusions that directly address the future of the U.S. military and, in particular, the safety and survival of the senior military leadership. So, here we go. The free will ETs and the controlling ETs are deeply divided and are at a near state of constant confrontation and even war. The free will ETs have the dominant military resources in the solar system currently, but they are threatening to leave the solar system if the political leadership, especially of the United States, signs renewed agreements with the controlling ETs. Prior agreements to allow the controlling ETs to operate on Earth are wearing thin. The free will ETs require an update of those agreements, or they will intervene to remove the controlling ETs from this solar system. Renewed agreements would be a free will choice to align humanity with the controlling ETs, and the free will ETs will reluctantly respect this if those agreements are signed. The controlling ETs know this, and they are setting up a situation on Earth that will work to pressure human political leadership to sign new and updated agreements. To give some perspective of what the controlling ETs are like without being held back by the free will ETs, the controlling ETs totally dominated Earth during the ancient Egyptian pyramid building years. Forced labor, dirt poverty, severe punishments, and slavery were the widespread norm in those days. Many Farsight remote viewing projects, all conducted under clean and totally blind scientific conditions, have shown this aspect of the controlling ET's behavior. This totalitarian control during the ancient Egyptian pyramid building days was broken up due to the military intervention of free will ETs who are currently and temporarily holding the controlling ETs in check. Should the free will ETs leave, the controlling ETs will have no reasons to hold back in any way. The controlling ETs have no interest in supporting a technologically advancing human civilization, and they certainly do not want the continued advancement of weaponry by the U.S. military. Promises for continued help with ET technology will be ignored or withdrawn if the free will ETs leave the solar system. The controlling ETs will revert to pursuing their own interests with this planet and its human population. The signed agreements will not be worth anything in real terms. Next, the American political system has been totally corrupted by the controlling ETs who have a direct interest in maintaining secrecy about their activities. All methods of corruption have been employed by the controlling ETs, from bribery and threats to mental manipulation. If the public should find out about the reality of the extraterrestrial presence on Earth, and especially the past activities of the controlling ETs, there would be widespread disapproval, and human political leadership would not be able to sign updated agreements with the controlling ETs. So for the controlling ETs to continue operating on Earth by ridding themselves of the restraints imposed on them by the free will ETs, the process of disclosure of the ET presence on Earth must be avoided at all costs. The controlling ETs will lose everything if there is disclosure, since the masses will demand an alignment with the free will ETs, and this will be seen as a free will choice by the free will ETs that they will respect. And they will then intervene directly to remove the controlling ETs from the system. One should not underestimate the abilities of the controlling ETs to mentally manipulate and control humans, including human military and political leadership. This is currently limited to some extent by the free will ETs, but again, the goal of the controlling ETs is to eliminate these restrictions. The process of controlling humans mentally is called neural engagement. All ETs can do this to some extent, although the free will ETs only communicate with humans telepathically. The free will ETs do not control or manipulate humans using neural engagement, since this would be a violation of their basic principles. Nonetheless, it is good to know that the free will ETs do have the capability of doing this, even if they choose not to do it. Both the controlling ETs and the free will ETs use mental means of warfare in addition to the use of physical weaponry. The free will ETs use it for defensive purposes, whereas the controlling ETs use it for offensive weaponry as well. Mental weaponry is the weaponry of first choice for the controlling ETs, since if they can dominate an enemy mentally, they do not have to risk losing physical resources. Currently, the free will ETs are militarily dominant in the solar system and the nearby region due to an influx of resources, although this is not true of the galaxy as a whole. The free will ETs have the ability to protect Earth's human population, but they do not do this unless there is a free will choice made by the population to align itself with the free will ETs. Now, here is a basic fact. The controlling ETs lie. Nothing told to humans by the controlling ETs can or should be trusted. No promises will be kept. The controlling ETs have no interest in maintaining an evolving and technologically advanced human population on Earth. Within a short period of time, say 100 years, unrestrained development of human technology would threaten the military advantage of the controlling ETs. Unrestricted technological evolution happens quickly, and the controlling ETs would not want this to happen. The controlling ETs will find it necessary to stop all technological development by humans on Earth, and possibly to strip humanity of much existing technology. One should expect this to begin as soon as the free will ETs leave the system. Also, one should assume that all generals and admirals in the U.S. military will be physically eliminated, which means killed, by the controlling ETs if the free will ETs leave the system. No general or admiral should doubt this basic conclusion. Any future rebellion against the controlling ETs will start with the senior military leadership, and the controlling ETs will not risk this. And once you are killed, you should absolutely assume that you, as an ISB, will not retain any of the rank or privileges that you have now as a senior military officer in the United States Armed Forces. You would be trafficked in the human trafficking process just like everyone else. Essentially, the free will ETs are trying to rescue a captive human population from a trafficking scheme. And you know how human traffickers work on Earth. Well, the galactic traffickers are no different. They will tell you anything in order to manipulate you into a situation where they can control and enslave you. Traffickers in the galaxy work the exact same way traffickers work here on Earth. There are no scruples. You would never believe anything a human trafficker on Earth would say. You know they would lie about everything. Why should you believe a galactic trafficker? They are no different. On the civilian side, the human political leadership in the short run will be mentally manipulated with neural engagement if the free will ETs leave. Eventually, the human political leadership will be eliminated or reduced in number. The remaining human political leadership will be mentally controlled by the controlling ETs. Also, the controlling ETs will likely seek to reduce the size of the human population dramatically. The controlling ETs will find it difficult to manage such a large human population. For their own purposes, the controlling ETs do not need that many physical humans. They can contain the entire population as non-physical ISBs easier than as physical humans. They have the technology to trap and contain the entire non-physical human ISB population. Maintaining a large physical population is a drain on resources that the controlling ETs will want to reduce. Now, some expectations regarding the current human crises. Work done at Farsight clearly suggests that the following crises are being engineered by the controlling ETs. The crises are designed to create a situation in which the human political leadership feels overwhelmed and is willing to sign agreements with the controlling ETs in exchange for assistance managing these crises. These three crises appear to be orchestrated to peak around the same time for maximum effect. 1. The war in Ukraine will move in an increasingly dangerous direction, and there is a real possibility that Putin will use at least one tactical nuclear weapon. He knows he will not be able to survive in power if Russia loses the war. He will become increasingly desperate. 2. President Xi of mainland China knows he's getting older, and he will try to resolve the Taiwan issue soon. He will likely threaten the use of military force on Taiwan. You may also see some military activity, especially with some smaller islands. Efforts will be made to force Taiwan to capitulate. Taiwan will resist, of course, and this will threaten real war. 3. The U.S. political scene will almost certainly devolve into violence in the aftermath of the 2024 election. Signs of this are already happening. There will also be direct threats to the lives of political leaders. What we saw with the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband will probably turn into more widespread threats on other major political leaders. It seems clear that the probability is high that there will be major violence following the 2024 presidential election, regardless of who wins the election. The U.S. military is split politically, and there is a real threat that the military could fragment following the 2024 presidential election. The 124 retired generals and admirals who signed the open letter criticizing the 2020 election results indicates that currently serving military leaders are similarly split along highly volatile political lines. It is very easy to see a situation evolve in which major elements of the populace become violent after the 2024 election, and then certain military leaders will start to take sides, leading to U.S. military units confronting each other. Here are some causes. Again, based on research done at Farsight, these crises appear to be orchestrated and manipulated into peaking simultaneously by the controlling ETs who want to create a situation that looks totally hopeless to American and Western political leaders, pressuring them to sign documents allowing the controlling ETs to continue to operate unhindered on U.S. soil as well as on the territories of some other nations in exchange for help in diffusing the crises. Now, the controlling ETs could diffuse the crises as easily as they created them in the first place through mental manipulation or neural engagement of select political leadership. Again, the game plan is for the controlling ETs to attempt to manipulate the free will ETs into leaving the system by having human leadership align themselves with the controlling ETs. The controlling ETs have controlled civilizations for a very long time, going back millions of years. They absolutely do not need the American military leadership to do this. They have their own military leadership that they trust completely. American military leadership would only be a threat to them in the future. They simply will not tolerate it. The only expectation should be that they will kill all generals and admirals to prevent any threats of rebellion in the future. This would be true even with the officers who have worked with the controlling ETs previously. The U.S. military, if it is allowed to continue to exist at all, will be transformed into a domestic police force that will be used to control the masses while the controlling ETs work to reduce the size of the human population. Since many in the masses will obviously protest this, the control exerted by the controlling ETs will certainly be severe. This is another reason why the senior military officers would be eliminated. They would likely object to the way American civilians are being treated, punished, tortured, and killed. The controlling ETs will not risk any form of rebellion. Our work at Farsight indicates that there are no free societies in this galaxy that are not well defended. Any free civilization will be taken over by the controlling ETs if the free civilization lacks sufficient military capabilities to defend itself. Now, the military capabilities can be in the form of weaponry that the civilization itself has, but it can also be in the form of allies. Effective weaponry must include both physical weapons as well as mental or psi weaponry. All effective militaries must have the capability to defend themselves against mental assaults as well as physical assaults. This means that training soldiers in the use of mental, defensive, and offensive capabilities is essential. It is also crucial that technological and genetic enhancements be developed to increase the effectiveness of mental weaponry capabilities. No civilization can defend itself with physical weaponry alone. Mental or psi warfare capabilities is not an option. It is a requirement for any civilization that seeks to remain free. Militaries are not a necessary evil. They are a necessary good. Without an effective military defensive capability, no free civilization can survive. Free civilizations depend on allies to maintain their freedom. It is unlikely that a solitary free civilization can survive alone. Allies are almost always necessary. If humanity is to become an entirely free civilization, it is essential that the United States military in particular survive and thrive. For this reason, it is essential that the lives of senior military personnel must be safeguarded. If the senior military command of the United States is decapitated, the militaries of no other free nations on this planet will survive. The highest priority of the existing U.S. military must be to guarantee its own survival, and the survival of all senior leadership, or all is lost. The situation is not unlike that of a parent and a child who are flying on a commercial aircraft. If an emergency occurs when in flight and oxygen masks are deployed, the instructions are that the parent should put on the oxygen mask first before assisting the child with his or her mask. Otherwise, both the parent and the child may be overcome and perish. Just as with this example, the United States military must first guarantee its own survival and the survival of all senior military leaders if there is going to be any hope of defending human civilization on this planet. Failure to survive as a coherent military force will mean enslavement and worse for everyone. The only way to ensure the survival of the U.S. military is with total disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence on Earth, both past and present. This will trigger an uprising from the masses, and demands will be made that human leadership must align itself with the free will ETs. All of our research indicates that this will produce sufficient free will extraterrestrial allies such that the controlling ETs will withdraw from the solar system. What will happen at that point is that humanity will need to gather all its resources to unravel the technology that has been put in place to contain the planetary ISBE population, including what we at Farsight call the death traps. We have a project by that name. Human ingenuity can do this if it is allowed to work in an environment where the truth is known. Disclosure is no longer a fringe issue. It is now a military strategy. Without it, the free will ETs will withdraw and the U.S. military will be radically transformed and all senior military officers will be eliminated. This seems so obvious that it hardly seems necessary to belabor the point. The U.S. military must survive this juncture in our planet's development. This cannot happen without supportive extraterrestrial allies. Under no circumstances should you believe any promises made by the controlling ETs. The only thing they want right now is for the free will ETs to leave. Period. Disclosure will change the involvement of the free will ETs. They will certainly protect the senior military leadership as well as the political leadership. They currently have the military capability to do this. The fate of Earth and humanity appears to be an extremely high priority for the free will ETs. But, as I said before, they have a near fanatical adherence to respecting free will, and they will not use that military capacity to protect Earth unless there is a free will decision to request that assistance. Disclosure will trigger that decision. Nothing else that I know of will do this job. Right now, disclosure is the only way to safeguard the current structure of the U.S. military and to safeguard the continued development of the defensive capabilities of the U.S. military, including the technological development of physical weaponry and mental or psi weaponry capabilities. And keeping the U.S. military intact is the only way to safeguard the population on this planet, including the entire ISBE population, those currently with physical bodies and those without. Disclosure is also the only way forward if humanity wants to interact freely with the rest of the free civilizations in this galaxy. Disclosure's moment has arrived. Disclosure is now or never. If the political leadership is tricked into signing those agreements with the controlling ETs, then everything is lost. The controlling ETs will have won this planet. The U.S. military will be dismantled, and the population on this planet will lose all hope. The survival and freedom of everyone on this planet depends on this not happening. Disclosure is the only path available to us now that will prevent that disaster. Disclosure is a military strategy for survival. The idea that the plan of the controlling ETs is planetary acquisition has also been a point that has been made by Dr. David M. Jacobs in his book, Walking Among Us, The Alien Plan to Control Humanity. Dr. Jacobs uses an entirely different methodology than what we use at Farsight. He interviews abduction victims directly, both with and without hypnosis, to aid memory recall. His work really is quite thorough, and his latest book in particular is really worth reading. So you have two academics using different methodologies coming to the same conclusion. Dr. Jacobs and I are the only surviving and tenured academics who have written about the extraterrestrials. And I say surviving because Dr. John Mack of Harvard has died. One might say that David Jacobs and I are the only academics brave enough to talk about the subject. Fear and intimidation run rampant through the academic community, just like everywhere else. Fear and intimidation are part of the plan. The controlling ETs depend on that to maintain the secrecy of their efforts. Planetary acquisition is the goal, and the end game is finally upon us. And you are the military. Your job is to protect everyone else. You cannot let fear and intimidation affect you as well. And you have your own self-interest to think of as well. If you do not force disclosure to happen one way or another, and soon, you will be the first sacrificial lambs to be led to the slaughter. This is what totalitarian regimes do the moment they seize power. They eliminate all possible future threats to that power, and that absolutely includes those who enabled their rise to power in the first place. Look at Hitler. Once the deal was made to enable him to become Chancellor of Germany, he immediately killed those very same people who made the deal with him to become Chancellor. The military officers who are currently working with the controlling ETs are not going to survive no matter what the controlling ETs have told them. They will be killed off as quickly as all the other senior military officers. The controlling ETs do not need them once the free will ETs have left the system. Again, planetary acquisition is the plan, the only plan. And the time to finalize everything and make that plan a reality is now. So if we are to stop that from happening, it needs to happen now, or at least very, very soon. Exact dates are hard to pin down, but my best guess is that if you wait for the chaos of the 2024 election aftermath to occur before triggering disclosure, it may be too late. At that point, political leaders will be so desperate to stop the madness that they may be willing to sign anything. You must not let that happen. A big question is obviously how to do disclosure. I also hope it is obvious that small and tentative measures at disclosure will not work at this point. There has been so much extraterrestrial involvement in our collective past, for some it may seem overwhelming to disclose the entire thing all at once. But, however you handle it, you must be sure that disclosure is not seriously restrained. Humanity has never encountered such a subtle and dangerous wartime situation. This is a war that has been fought in the minds of a captive planetary population. Small or incremental measures at disclosure is not going to win this war. The controlling ETs will simply laugh at anything half-hearted. It would tell the controlling ETs that their campaign of fear and intimidation is still alive and well. So for discussion, here's a suggestion. If the entire senior leadership of the military cannot be of one mind with regard to disclosure, perhaps because some senior military officers are victims of neural engagement, or perhaps because they simply do not believe their survival is at stake and they want to maintain what they see as a working relationship with the controlling ETs, then the part of the military that does want to make disclosure happen could approach disclosure by releasing information saying that both remote viewing and extraterrestrials are real, and that the military uses remote viewing. Some connection to work done at Farsight should be made if that approach is to work, since some supportive information must accompany any initial disclosure statement. The Farsight connection should be clear, although it can be direct or indirect. The extraterrestrials use telepathy and remote viewing as a normal means of communication and information transfer. There is no way to talk about extraterrestrials without covering telepathy and remote viewing. It would be like trying to talk about farming without talking about vegetables. We have structured all of Farsight with the intent of being ready for this moment of disclosure. It is a resource that is designed to be used collaboratively with any official disclosure effort. On a technical level, Farsight's video streaming service is run by Vimeo, and Vimeo can handle the loads that will result from disclosure. We also have a great deal of information on YouTube, which can also handle the loads. Moreover, the instructional videos for remote viewing are free on farsightprime.com, so there will be no claim that information about how to do remote viewing is being held back. This way, disclosure can be accomplished by having the media and the masses watch the projects to obtain background and supplemental information, without the military needing to comment on each point or each historical event. This will be helpful if there are efforts to stop the military from disclosing additional information, since the disclosure process can continue independently once it is started. A great many projects are offered for free on farsightprime.com and similarly on YouTube, so there will be a lot to digest once the disclosure process begins. One way or another, the public is going to have to be told that the extraterrestrial presence on Earth has been going on for a long time. And one way or another, the public is going to have to be told that the content of Farsight's projects is significant. It is indeed the history of this planet. Exactly how you handle disclosure is above my pay grade, but it is clear that the civilian political leadership is highly unlikely to do this all by themselves. They appear to be highly manipulated and compromised. No civilian leader or political party is free from this. For this to work, Elements of the U.S. military must see disclosure as a necessary strategy for survival, and a way must be found to trigger this without the direct help of the political leadership. The political leadership will then be forced to respond appropriately. Disclosure will obviously disrupt the normal daily news feed that is given to the public, but the chaos will be quickly followed by a mass demand for alignment with the free will ETs, and the political leadership will follow the lead of the masses. Everything else will fall into place, one step at a time. Understand that planetary crises are coming to a boil anyway. There is no way to avoid some type of chaos in our near-term future. Events are being orchestrated by the controlling ETs to motivate the civilian leadership through desperation, fear, and intimidation to sign agreements that will align this planet with the controlling ETs. So chaos is going to happen regardless. Producing some level of chaos by triggering disclosure is not going to be any worse than what is already heading our way. It is just a situation of whether the chaos is going to help humanity or hurt humanity. Disclosure will fix a very long-standing problem, one that most humans don't even know exists. The lack of disclosure will lead to a future where humanity will never learn that there even was a long-standing problem. The lack of disclosure leads only to one outcome: the dismantling of the United States military as an effective fighting force that could eventually challenge the controlling ETs, and the decapitation of all senior military leadership and the long-term enslavement of the human population. If you push your intelligence people to verify one way or another the essential elements of what I have discussed in this briefing, you will see that this is the only conclusion that makes sense. Disclosure is the only way to stop that horrific future from happening. It is the only way to enlist the necessary allies that humanity needs at this crucial juncture to defeat the war efforts of the controlling ETs. And make no mistake about it, this is a war being fought by a devious enemy that has had millions of years' practice at manipulating and controlling planetary populations. If you are to combat such an enemy, you must have allies who know how to do it. Don't think for a second that the U.S. military could do this by itself or with the assistance of any other human military on Earth. And don't think for a second that the senior military leaders are safe without the military protection provided by the free will ETs. Disclosure is the only sure way to get those free will ET allies. Indeed, those very allies are waiting for you to act so that they can come to our rescue. If you do your part, they will do theirs. One last thing. We need to talk about the masses themselves. Totalitarian organizations always try to crush their societies into submission. Always. So we can expect that from the controlling ETs. But if humanity is to resist, and especially if humanity is to collectively call out for an alignment with the free will ETs, then humanity is going to need to have hope that this can happen, and that someone is there fighting for them to succeed. As things are currently structured, the population in the United States is increasingly becoming polarized to the extent that it may not be a functional society in the near future. And the controlling ETs know that if they can destabilize the American public and nation, the other free will nations on this planet will not be able to resist. So something needs to happen that will pull everyone together. Disclosure can do this if it is known that the military is fighting for them, and that disclosure is part of the struggle. People must not lose hope. They must believe that good can come out of this. That is the only way to keep the nation and the rest of humanity unified. Success comes from the widespread belief in something important, and the belief that all necessary efforts are worth the struggle. The past can be forgiven if the present contains honesty that breeds commitment. People already know they cannot trust their civilian leadership. They know lying is normal for political leaders across all parties and ideologies. They need to know that someone is telling them the truth and that this involves something worth fighting for. They need to believe in the future. And this is part of the wartime strategy that is needed for humanity to regain its true freedom and its positive destiny. If the military does not do this, who else will do this? Working with the controlling ETs will not produce anything positive in the near future. And even those senior military officers who have worked cooperatively in the past with those same controlling ETs will not survive the purge. There is absolutely no reason why the controlling ETs would keep them around once the free will ETs are out of the picture. So disclosure resets the entire system. It exposes the activities of the controlling ETs, and it sets a clear path for a positive alignment with the free will ETs. That is a path that can win, and that is a path that is worth fighting for, and that is the only path that leads to the survival of the senior military leaders. I want to thank all the military members who have watched this intelligence briefing. Farsight is absolutely pro-military, and for a good and logical reason. We fully recognize that no free civilization exists in this entire galaxy that is not fully protected. And again, the military is not a necessary evil. It is a necessary good. Any and all free civilizations that are not protected eventually are conquered and absorbed by the totalitarian forces that exist in this galaxy. Freedom cannot survive without you. So your survival as a coherent military establishment is absolutely required. Your survival is this planet's highest priority right now, and that can only happen in the context of disclosure. Disclosure will lead to public demands for alignment with the free will ETs, and those demands will lead to political leadership enabling an alignment with the free will ETs, and that alignment will bring the active participation of the free will ETs as allies who will enable our collective survival as a free world. Disclosure, alignment, allies, and survival. That is the order of things that will do the job. It is also in the personal self-interest of every senior U.S. military officer to make this happen. The survival of everyone else depends on your survival. Disclosure is the only thing that can safeguard that. Please note that over the next few weeks and months, Farsight will be releasing projects that are specifically designed to assist the United States military with their informational needs. I hope you can follow these releases. They will be placed on farsightprime.com. Again, thank you for listening. I am Courtney Brown, Director of Farsight.